We launched Canada's first cloud computing ETF back in January of this year. It's listed on the TSX with the ticker DATA. In order to understand and appreciate cloud computing, I think it's always worthwhile to look back at our world 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if you worked at a company, you remember that you had file servers in a room, somewhere on your floor, in your building, and that's where your data would be stored. Bigger your company, the more rows of file servers you would have, or the bigger that room would be. Now, companies didn't really know how much data storage they were going to require, so they would go and make these big one-time investments into the infrastructure. If they ended up using 20% of the storage capacity, well, then they way overpaid for that infrastructure. If they required 120% of the storage capacity, well, then that's when we remember hearing stories about people's servers crashing, and that's when companies would have to go and make bigger investments. Think also back to your world 10 years ago. If you wanted the latest edition of Microsoft Office or any other software, you would go to the store and you would buy it and you'd bring it back and you'd plug it into your computer. When was the last time you plugged anything or inserted anything into your computer besides the power source? That's because a lot of our data and a lot of our services, our software services, are hosted in the cloud today. There are huge advantages related to cloud computing. First and foremost, very cost efficient. You pay for what you use. So it's a little bit like your light switch in your room. You come into your room and it's dark, you turn your light switch on. When you leave the room, you turn it off. That's when you stop paying for the electricity. Similar to cloud-based computing or cloud storage, you pay for what you use when you're using it. So there's a lot of flexibility and cost efficiency attached to it. The other big advantage of cloud computing is the fact that you can access the data, you can access the programs wherever you are in the world. There are three main types of cloud computing platforms. There's infrastructure as a service, or IaaS. There's software as a service, or SaaS. And there's platform as a service, which is PaaS. Now, on the infrastructure side, you have companies like Amazon Web Services, as well as Microsoft Azure, as well as Google Cloud, that control just over 50% of the cloud computing market. Oftentimes when we're using software as a service, or SaaS, we are actually using IaaS or Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud as the back-end platform to access that. So for example, when you're streaming a movie off of Netflix, you're actually using AWS's infrastructure to actually, cloud computing infrastructure to actually stream that. Now let's go into 2020. Obviously, cloud computing became very important when we all got vaulted into this work from home environment. And I will say this, thank God this pandemic, if there was one silver lining, thank God that it happened now instead of 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to be using things like video conferencing tools, which are primarily cloud-based. We wouldn't have been able to stream movies efficiently off of Netflix. We wouldn't be able to stream our games efficiently as well. We would have been much more isolated than what we have. So we're very fortunate to be living in a time where we've had such technological advancements, and cloud computing has been one of the biggest contributors to those technology advancements. COVID really created some behavioral shifts as it relates to cloud computing. A lot of companies needed to scramble to make sure that they had enough infrastructure, not just cybersecurity infrastructure, but also proper cloud-based infrastructure. Things like DocuSign became so valuable. And DocuSign is interesting because it's a great example of creating a long-term behavioral shift. The moment that you can sign documents online instead of having to print them, sign them, scan them, and send them back, you're not going to go backwards anymore. So to me, there's been a major shift in usage and adoption of SaaS as well as infrastructure and as well as PaaS as well. Let's look forward. You know how they say everything is in the cloud? Well, it's actually not really true yet. Still about 40% of the world's data is hosted in the cloud. If you started a company in the last 5 years, you went straight to the cloud. But if your company has been around for 30, 40 years, it's not as simple a migration as you might think. And security sometimes is a bit of a concern especially as you're migrating data as well. So we have a long way to go. Now we expect that in the next 5 to 10 years, close to 80 to 90% of all of the world's data will be hosted in the cloud, but there's still a big opportunity for migration, and it's tended to be slow. Use that example of DocuSign again. You know, a lot of companies would have very easily made the investment to license DocuSign, but unfortunately they couldn't mesh that with the existing infrastructure that they had in place. So we're definitely going through a process right now where we're seeing greater and greater migration. Now, today, the cloud computing market is about $500 billion. So it's actually quite large, but it's expected to grow to about $1 trillion just in the next 10 years. And we think that estimate could be somewhat conservative. To get a sense of how important cloud computing has become, you look at companies like AWS, Amazon, Microsoft Azure, for example. So AWS now is contributing for last year 57% of Amazon's operating income. When you dissect the divisional growth within Microsoft, Azure and their cloud computing business over the last few years has been by far their fastest growing segment. And we expect that to continue over the next 5 to 10 years.